So when I was in high school, it was my senior year. I was 5'3" and about 95 pounds. I was at the park down the street from my house waiting for the school bus. Usually, my boyfriend, who had already graduated, would drive me to school, but he was busy. I later found out he was cheating. Well, there were usually a few of us girls there waiting, but this day I was the only one. So I sat at a bench and had one headphone in and one out so I could listen to my surroundings. I've always been cautious of what's going on around me. As I waited, a black Honda pulled up and I immediately noticed it. I kept an eye on it because I had a bad feeling. I wasn't making it obvious that I was watching it because I didn't want to look crazy, but after a few minutes, two big men got out. I immediately texted my boyfriend that I was at the park and these guys were creeping me out. Of course, he didn't text me back, so I copy-pasted the same text to my cousin who was home. I lived with my aunt and two guy cousins. Unwinding from the night shift, I wanted someone to know the car make and color, plus there were two men. I didn't get any responses. When they got out of their car, they started to walk towards me, so I got up from the bench and walked towards the street, because the bus was supposed to be there any minute. The driver actually ended up being a little late. As I stood by the street, these men walked up to me, and I could feel the bad energy. One guy said hello, as the other stood there staring me down. I just did a small smile and a nod, then looked away. Then the same guy, I'll call him number 1, asked how old I was. I didn't respond. I could tell the other guy, number 2, was getting mad that I wasn't feeding into it. Then the first guy kept asking me yes or no questions like, do you have a boyfriend? Do you live close? Do you do any drugs? We have some. Do you want some? And then the second guy asked if I knew what the black market was. I felt a cold rush go over my body and I got the chills. Number 2, who was quiet the whole time, started telling me they just got back from Russia, but the way he said it was so scary, almost intimidating. I knew they were from somewhere else because they had strong accents, but I couldn't pinpoint the place. He kept telling me to go to their car because they had drugs. I said no thank you. Trust me, I wasn't a straight edge in high school, but I was not stupid either. I would never get into somebody's car that I didn't know. Then number 1 asked if I have a car. I said no and that my bus is almost here, and sorry, I have to go. By some sort of miracle, the bus rounded the corner and the guys backed off. They had been inching closer and closer as they asked me questions. But before the bus got to me, the first guy handed me a card and said he has a car shop and to call him sometime if I need anything. He even stated he'd give me a free car. The card looked shifty and I didn't want to grab it, but I knew I needed that number on it to report it. So I took it and they walked off super fast. Finally, the bus stopped and picked me up. As soon as I got on, I started to cry. It was like all the adrenaline was keeping my mind and body aware and focused while the men were there. But as soon as I was safe, my body and mind gave out. Thankfully, there weren't many people on the bus, so the driver calmed me down before he took off, and I explained to her what happened. When she looked around for the car, they were gone. She said she saw them around me, but thought I knew them because they were so close to my person. The driver called into her dispatch, saying that there was an incident so that they could notify the school. She continued to pick all the other students up, but when we got to the school, she walked me into the office. I was terrified to be alone. The principal came out, and so did campus security. They were sweet and gentle with me as they brought me back to the principal's office. Both were men, and they proceeded to ask me questions about the guys, their car, and the questions the creeps had asked me. I then pulled out the card the guy gave me and handed it to the principal. He looked at the security and said he was going to call it and act like my dad, so he did. It was on speaker, and the first guy answered. I knew his voice as if it was burned into my brain. It took everything in me not to have a panic attack. The principal asked the guy if he could get him a card at a good price, and the guy played dumb. The principal said to his daughter, me gave him the card. As soon as he said that, the guy hung up. They tried calling again, and the phone was shut off, then eventually disconnected. I could see a shift in the principal and security as soon as the phone clicked. The security guard got on his phone and called the police and had them come to the school. It was as if they finally knew it was real, like my crazy story wasn't made up. The principal excused himself and the security guard, and they talked for a minute in the hall. I could hear everything they were saying though. She's lucky to be alive. This is serious. We need to call her parents to come get her. When the police got there, they came into the office that I was sitting in and asked me for the story again in front of the principal and security guard. I feel like they wanted to see if I was being 100% honest, so I obliged. The officers were straight up with me and told me it sounded like they were watching us girls at that park because they chose the one day that one of us was alone. He also said the car was being used as bait to get me to go where they wanted. I felt sick. I couldn't breathe. The school called my aunt, but she didn't pick up. The only person that picked up first was my boyfriend. One of the officers talked to him as the other finally got a hold of my aunt. My boyfriend ended up picking me up and taking me home, and I cried the whole time. When I got there, my grandma, uncle, aunt, mom, and cousins were all out front. The women were all in tears, and the men were livid, but more worried for me. A week later, some girl at another local high school, not far from the park, was saved by other students. She was being dragged into a black Honda by two guys. Other kids stood up and grabbed her and pulled her out of their car. The principal called me into his office, and that's how I found out. They also had the same officers there and had me choose the two guys out of a picture lineup. I pointed them out fast. They were caught. It was, in fact, those two guys that tried grabbing the girl, a freshman girl. I felt worried for her and sad that she went through worse than I did. And I felt almost free again. Still scared, but not looking over my shoulder as often. I couldn't believe they were caught. After that, my family teamed up to drive me to school for the rest of the year. My boyfriend, now ex, also took me some days. I'm thankful to be alive and well, and I'm even more thankful that the girl was also saved by the courageous kids at school. So this happened a few months ago. I'm a sophomore in college and was traveling down to my hometown over break. I was having some relationship issues with my stepmom, so I didn't want to stay at my dad's house the night I arrived in my hometown. So I phoned a friend of mine from high school if I could stay at his place. I knew from social media that he was still in town, and I've stayed at his place before, so I knew there would be a place for me to stay if they would allow it. My friend, let's call him Z, seemed like a pretty normal dude. We weren't best friends or anything, but we got pretty close by the time we graduated. We would occasionally text or hang out if I was in town and catch up, reminisce on the times we spent in orchestra or in English class. When I called, he seemed extremely enthusiastic. Z's a normally upbeat guy, but this time it seemed like he was getting a brand new car. I didn't think about it at the time, and he said I could sleep in the guest room, so I headed over. When I got to his house, he was just as excited as he was on the phone. He was bringing up stuff to do, like getting high and watching weird movies or playing video games. Z's parents weren't home, so he really wanted the opportunity to smoke. I was pretty tired from the drive, but since we rarely see each other, I thought a little bit of bonding couldn't hurt. We played Smash Bros, smoked some weed, and just chatted for a few hours. It was longer than I wanted, but I was having fun, so whatever, right? By the time it was getting late, around 2 a.m., he started asking me some pretty weird questions. Like if I ever wondered what it was like to kill someone, or if I thought anyone would miss me if I was gone. This along with some pretty normal questions like if I had a boyfriend, or how my parents were doing, or if I was making any friends at school. Gave me a weird feeling. I was confused in the moment, but it didn't hit me until after that. Z could be assessing me for something bad. The weirdness of it all made me just want to go to bed. We stopped the game and both went into the basement where his room and the guest room were. We said goodnight. I go to my room and I get ready for bed. I'm having trouble sleeping, just insomnia that I've had for a while, so I stay awake for around an hour until I hear some movement outside my room. The walls were pretty thin, so I could hear footsteps walking past my door and up the stairs to the main floor, and then back down quickly after. What struck me as odd was that I didn't hear the basement door open, which creaks when it does. The light didn't turn on, so I was confused about what Z was doing. I heard him go back into his room, but I had this odd feeling. Just ever since I met him this night, he seemed a lot different than he's ever been. I decided to look him up on social media and Google to see if there's anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed normal until I found his Tumblr, which was linked from his inactive Twitter account that I found on my Twitter contact list. His Tumblr was, well, disturbing. There were graphic drawings of mutilated bodies of humans and animals, links to suspicious-looking websites that I didn't dare to click on, and text posts and stories about murder, cannibalism, necrophilia, and torture. There were photos of guns, knives, and axes, which, after looking closely, were taken in his bedroom. The last post, around a week prior, was a text post from the account, saying he wished he could find someone easy to kill, like a homeless person. I was immediately filled with dread. I knew he was going to do something. He must have gone up the stairs to lock the door. I packed my things. Luckily, I packed lightly, and I opened the small window at the top of my bedroom wall. I started desperately climbing through, and as I was pulling my legs through, he opened the door. It was dark, but the streetlight illuminated enough for me to see he was carrying something long and skinny, so probably a knife. He didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. I just turned around, hopped in my car, and drove as fast as I could to my dad's house. I immediately blocked him everywhere and reported his Tumblr account. Not before telling the police. They said they couldn't do anything as the guns were registered under his dad, and he hasn't actually done anything yet. Nevertheless, I told my other high school friends not to hang out with Z. Ever since then, I've been creeped out whenever I meet new people. Just the realization that someone I knew so well could underneath be this person who could hurt me so bad, who could kill me. I don't know what you're doing now, Z, and I'm not sure I want to know, but I hope you're getting help. I recently learned of some chilling details about a person that was heavily involved in my life as a child, and I thought I would share the story. Throughout my childhood, I was extremely shy and did not find myself going out of my way to make friends in new settings. I had recently started preschool at my grandmother's church, and I remember being on the playground playing by myself when a woman introduced herself to me. Her name was Candy, and she looked like any other sweet old woman. She almost reminded me of my own grandmother with her abundance of white curls on her head. Candy was a volunteer at the church and typically watched over the children while they played, so we would see each other fairly often. I can't remember much about the start of this friendship, but I presume one thing led to another before I was frequently spending time with her, in and out of school. My parents were grateful to have someone who was interested in watching me, as I was the youngest of the three, and my parents worked full-time, while also taking my brother and sister to and from school, sports, or friends' houses. So having a helping hand was a blessing for them. To be honest, I don't remember too many details about spending time with Candy, but I suppose we spent our free time frequenting ice cream shops, parks, etc. I do have one memory of going to her house where I had never been before, and as she was showing me around, I remember passing through the dining room and seeing another girl who looked to be around 10 or 12 years old. Candy introduced me to her and told me that she lived down the street and would spend a lot of time at her house. I'm not sure why, but I remember being jealous. I guess I was jealous that Candy also cared for and spent time with another little girl. I had never felt that way before, and I'm not sure why I remember that so clearly. For some reason, that was the only time I went to her house. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in first grade. I had totally forgotten about Candy and not seen her since I graduated preschool 2 years prior. My neighbors, who I carpooled to school with, had dropped me off at my house after school one day, and I spotted a Target grocery bag hooked to our front door. I wasn't sure what it could be or why my brother or sister didn't bring it inside when they arrived home from school an hour or so before me. When I took it inside, I noticed writing on the bag indicating that there was a gift inside for me from Candy. I ran up the stairs to my room, and to my surprise, there were several adorable brand new outfits inside just for me. I immediately tried them on and was so excited to show my mom when she came home from work. After my mom got home, I eagerly showed her the outfits that Candy had left for me. Unfortunately, my mom was not as excited as I was. In fact, she was quite angry. She yelled at me to take them off and said she would be returning them to Candy. I was so confused as to why she was upset with me. What did I do wrong? These are free clothes. A gift. Wouldn't it be rude to return a gift to someone? To avoid being punished, I put the clothes back in the bag and handed them to my mother. We never spoke of this again, and Candy slipped my mind for the next several years. A few years ago, my sister was home visiting from college. With nothing else to do, we decided to go to Target to shop for useless things we didn't need. As we were walking through the parking lot, the thought of the Target bag from Candy randomly dawned on me. I proceeded to laugh and asked her if she remembered and if she knew why Mom was in such an awful mood that day to force me to give the clothes back to Candy. My sister stopped dead in her tracks and said, "Wait, do you not remember what Candy did to us?" Taken aback, I shook my head and begged her to tell me what happened. She refused to talk about it and told me to ask my mom. Once again, the thought of Candy slipped my mind, and I didn't remember to ask my mother about what happened until I was in college a few years later. We were saying goodbye to my grandmother after grabbing lunch when she mentioned to my mom that someone's funeral was that weekend. They then sat in silence for a few minutes, just staring at each other. After my grandmother left, I asked my mom who they were talking about, and she informed me about Candy's death. The realization that I had never heard the true stories about this woman crossed my mind, and I asked my mom about what my sister refused to speak on. My mother proceeded to relay the horrible stories to me about the little old woman that tried to take me away from my family. At the beginning of their friendship, Candy genuinely was a big help to my family and was somebody that they trusted. However, her intentions were questioned by my grandmother, who shared a few of her concerns with my father after hearing some odd stories from her friends at church. She felt as though something was off with her, and she didn't like that I spent so much time with her. Coming from a woman who never had a negative thing to say about anyone, my father became slightly wary of Candy, but he assumed that my grandmother was just being overly cautious. After some time of Candy watching over and babysitting me, her demeanor changed, and she started acting possessive of me and became hostile towards my parents. She would show up unannounced to our house asking for me, and if I wasn't there, she would become incredibly angry and yell at my parents about how awful they were. She would continuously tell them that they didn't deserve me and only she was worthy of taking care of me. This happened several times before my parents told her to stop coming to the house or they would call the police. This inclined her to start calling the house and leave messages for me, which my parents obviously would not tell me about. In these voicemails, she would cry to me and try to convince me to leave with her and leave my family. She would talk about how awful my parents were and how she could give me a much better life than they could. The voicemails that were intended for me soon turned to threats for my parents. She threatened to call the police or child services to have me removed from the home and placed into her care. She threatened to tell the police about my parents' violence and abuse towards me and my siblings, none of which was true. Once she realized that her phone calls were not working, she began making efforts to show up at the house again. She started driving up and down our street day after day. She would ask our neighbors and then the neighbors' children if anyone knew if I was home or where I was. She would park her car and watch our house without anyone really noticing or saying anything. Eventually, our neighbors began recognizing her car and what was going on, and they would inform my parents when she came around asking about me. After some time of doing this, she took it upon herself to come to the front door while only my brother, who was like only 12 years old at the time, and I were home, and she started banging on the door, begging to see me. My brother opened one of the front doors, keeping the storm door between them closed, and told her to leave. She proceeded to plead with him to let her in, and he replied that I was not home, despite me napping soundly upstairs. Cheers for smart 12-year-old brothers. She partially forced herself through the door when my brother put his hand in her face, pushing her out of the door and told her that the police had been called. She left after that and distanced herself for a while before she encountered the final straw with my mother. One day, my mother and I were backing out of the driveway to attend a birthday party when Candy pulled in behind our car, blocking us from leaving. She came up to the window and my mother rolled it down ready to tell her off for good. Candy ignored her and looked right past my mother into the back seat where I was sitting. She said to me, "Wouldn't you rather come with me and never see your mom again? I love you so much, more than they ever did, and can give you everything you want if you come with me." This was the final straw for my mother. She never thought she would upset or fight with an old woman, but the day had come when it was absolutely necessary. She screamed and yelled at her, making sure to include that Candy would regret the day that she ever came into contact with me or my family again. Something she said must have actually scared her because she drove off and didn't appear in our lives again until the Target bag incident. I'm not sure how I never knew that any of this happened and never thought anything was weird about her when I was a child, but I guess my parents did a good job of shielding me from the horrors of the situation. After hearing about everything that took place, I assumed that there must have been a reason she became so obsessed with me. Did she not have her own family? Did she lose children or grandchildren and want to find someone to fill the void? According to my mother, she had several children that were much older than me, as well as young grandchildren. Thus, I'm not sure what would have sparked her interest in me, but thankfully, we no longer have to worry about her. Part of me still wonders if I repressed any memories or conversations with her that were upsetting. Did she ever privately talk to me about how awful my parents were, or how she wanted to take me away from my family? Did I ever agree to leave with her? I also wonder if, as I grew older and joined social media like Facebook, she ever searched my name. Did she ever watch me when I was in middle school? Or even when I went away for college? I have so many questions, but I'm glad that we never had to find out if she was going to follow through with any of her threats. As a word of advice, always trust your grandmother's instincts about other grandmothers and do not befriend the old woman volunteering on the playground. I don't want to give a lot away about my identity, but I will say that this takes place in a small town in Ontario where I grew up during 7th grade. So I and everyone in my class would have been about 12. Anyway, for the first part of 7th grade, we had a substitute teacher, Mr. L, who was only there until the actual teacher, Mr. C, came back from sick leave due to mental health issues we later found out. Mr. L was great, and he left after the winter break. That was when Mr. C showed up. He was kind of a creep from the start. He used to make a lot of little creepy remarks we would let slide, but eventually it escalated. One encounter I recall is that one day during recess, he tried to get me and a friend, Rachel, to say different words for penis and would ask us if we were comfortable saying things like that, etc. Now, as young girls, we decided to tell our parents, and they were pissed and called the school, which obviously did nothing about it because otherwise the rest of this wouldn't have taken place. Fast forward a couple of creepy months, I and Rachel are in the gymnasium with the rest of our class, about 20 kids. We are doing the gymnastics portion of our gym program. We are halfway through class and Rachel gets up and goes to the part of the gym where we would leave our shoes. So I turn around to look for her after a bit, and to my surprise, she is standing there across the gym in shock, holding a video camera. Now at this point, no one else has really noticed, and I haven't even put 2 and 2 together yet, but what happened next made me clue in pretty damn fast. Mr. C, who was at the time lounging around the gym, not really doing anything, sees Rachel with this camera. I swear, his face went from not having a care in the world to utter horror in all of a second. He grabbed a soccer ball from a nearby rack and chucked it across the room at Rachel, in front of 20 12-year-old kids. It hit her dead in the side of the face. She dropped the camera, screamed, and ran out of the room and into the office. I and everyone else in the class also ran out of the room in pursuit of her before Mr. C could do who the fuck knows what else. He grabbed his camera and ran out of the school. Never saw him again. Rachel, who happened to live on the same street as me, has friendly parents who talk to mine occasionally. We later learned they pressed charges, and he was convicted of assault on a minor, and also intent to harm minors or something along those lines. He had been videotaping our class since he had begun teaching us. He had dozens of tapes of our gym classes. He would position the cameras in different places to capture the most revealing angles for whatever it was we would be doing that day. Needless to say, we got a new teacher for the rest of the year, which was kind of awesome. At least because she would let us do whatever we wanted pretty much. In hindsight, everything about him seems so menacing now, from accidentally walking to our changing rooms to extensive health lessons about sex. First, I want to apologize because English isn't my native language, so maybe my writing might seem odd. So when I was in high school, I wasn't a very hardworking student. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was an incredibly lazy girl, working just the minimum so that my parents wouldn't get angry. I've always had some kind of easiness regarding schoolwork and never knew what it truly meant to make any effort. So I spent all of my classes drawing on my copybooks without many consequences. My junior year's math teacher, who was seen by everyone as uptight but very caring, was pretty upset about this, as were many of my previous teachers. He wanted me to work harder. I wasn't bad at math. I was around a 13 or 14 out of 20. I'm French, but I assume this is like having a B or a B minus. But sometimes my grades would be very low. During a teacher-parent meeting, he told my mom that I was wasting my capacities and that it was infuriating how lazy I was. My mom then replied that she agreed with him and that she wouldn't blame him for pushing me harder and for punishing me if it was for making me work harder. And from this day on, he did exactly what she told him. In every math class, he would always question me first before everyone else and was always sitting next to me when we were doing exercises. During the test, he was always telling me, "You can do it, Elisa." It made me incredibly uncomfortable because at this age, nobody wants to be the center of attention. My classmates started to realize that my math teacher was a little obsessed with me and were teasing me a lot about this. The last class before Christmas break, the math teacher threw a little surprise Christmas party. It was very nice. He gave us chocolates and mock champagne. We had a lot of fun. During the party, he poured me another glass of mock champagne, telling me that I deserved it because I was doing much better. And it was true. I was forced to work, so my grades were around 15 to 16, which I think is like having an A- or an A. I accepted it, but didn't drink it entirely. I have diabetes and already had too much chocolate. But during the next class, I was feeling very bad. I almost fainted and finished my last day of school before Christmas in the nurse's office. At that time, I wouldn't even think it was because of the alcohol-free champagne. I thought this was due to my diabetes, that I indeed had too much chocolate, even if it didn't look like my usual crisis. A few weeks later, my class threw some kind of charity event. It was a class project, and we were very proud. In my country, we don't have prom, so it was our occasion to wear pretty formal clothes and to dance together. The math teacher was invited, and he was helping some of the boys to tend the bar. He served me an alcohol-free cocktail, but before I could drink it, a classmate of mine, Flora, poured some vodka in it, even though it was forbidden to bring alcohol to the event. I was mad because with my diabetes, I couldn't drink alcohol, so I told her that she could just throw the cocktail. At the time, I thought she did, but now when I think about it, I wonder if she didn't choose to drink it instead. The event ended pretty badly because of the alcohol Flora had brought. Some guys were very drunk, and they started breaking things, etc., and Flora passed out because of all the alcohol she had. This ended the event. Flora had been admitted to the hospital because her coma was pretty severe, and we spent the next day being lectured by all the teachers of the school. Flora got expelled from the school and never went again. I was very upset with her. Because of her, every event would now be forbidden, and our project was a failure. We gave a very bad image to the association we were raising funds for, so I kind of ghosted her and never asked if she was doing better, etc. Now I feel bad about this, but at the time I was immature. A few weeks later, I failed a math test. It had been a long time since I failed a math test, and the math teacher was very angry. He yelled at me in front of everyone, saying how much of a disappointment I was, that I was hopeless, and that I would just end up living in a cardboard box under a bridge. Something was off. I was feeling it. He had a very weird look in his eyes. It chilled me, and I couldn't help it. I started crying. He calmed me down a bit and said he would just give me an hour of detention, during which I would copy my lesson. I was a little surprised because normally detention is for bad behavior, not for bad grades. But I was a little relieved because it was a small punishment. My parents would never know. Indeed, I lived kind of far from my high school, and there was only one bus every night between my high school and my home at 5 p.m. Because of that, even when I finished at 4 p.m., I would never go home before 5 p.m. And when I've had detention between 4 and 5 p.m., my parents would never know. But when he officially gave me the detention hour, he said that he wanted to be personally present during my detention hour and that the only possible hour was between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. I was really nervous because I would have to tell my parents to come get me at 6. Then they would know everything. As I said earlier, I wasn't a troublemaker, so at first, I planned to go to the detention hour. But during the day, my friends and I talked a lot about it, and I was feeling more rebellious because of the sensation of being supported by my friends, so I decided not to tell my parents that I was in detention, and that one of my friends would pick me up at 6 p.m. and drive me home. At 5 p.m., when heading towards the detention room, I was angry, mumbling that it wasn't fair to have detention because of having bad grades. When I arrived in front of the detention room, I realized I was the only one waiting. I then realized that I would be the only student in detention, along with that math teacher who was a little obsessive, and it was getting dark outside. It was during late winter, early spring, so the night was early. It was a big no for me, and when I saw him coming, I panicked. I said something like, "Sorry, I have an emergency. I have to go now. I will email the school to reschedule my detention hour." And then I ran off. He started to yell at me that I had to obey him and that he would call my parents, but at this moment I didn't care. I sprinted towards the bus stop and caught my bus. I was afraid that he would have called my parents, so when I arrived I was shaking, but my parents greeted me normally, so I assumed that eventually he didn't call them. He never came back the next day, nor for the next weeks. Eventually I learned that he quit his position. A shrink came during an hour to ask us if we wanted to talk about the math teacher, but as nobody knew what was going on with him, we didn't have much to say, and the shrink left, and we never heard of him again. Until a few months ago, I became a teacher. How ironic given my laziness when I was a teen. And one day, chatting with my coworker, I mentioned his name, talking about my weird bizarre math teacher and how I skipped a detention hour, and one of my oldest coworkers went very pale hearing his name. In fact, a few days after the detention hour incident, My math teacher was arrested for having downloaded illegal files from the dark web. Maybe this detention hour was just a normal detention hour and I would have gotten out of it without any problem. But now I will never know and will always wonder what would have happened if I stayed there or didn't catch my bus. And sorry, Flora, maybe you were expelled because of me.